The Hungarian GP has gone on a very sour note for Hamilton and Mercedes, and the seven-time world champion is not happy with the current development of his car. More often than not, he's called out his team publicly about them not copying what seems to be working wonders in other teams, especially Red Bull and most recently McLaren. And with his contract still hanging in the air, this is a very realistic obstacle that could give Mercedes some headaches. As to which circumstances they'll continue the collaboration with Hamilton. Furthermore, Hamilton doesn't seem to agree with Wolff in terms of whether or not Mercedes should continue with the development of the car in 2023, and therefore we're obviously going to have a very interesting and turbulent period ahead of us when it comes to Mercedes and their superstar of a driver. Lewis Hamilton has managed to earn his 104th career pole position, but the weekend didn't go exactly as he wanted it to. Ever since the free practice sessions, it's been evident that Hamilton is struggling a lot with the car, calling it the worst car he'll probably have to drive over the course of 2023. But the pole position on Sunday by 0.003 of a second has proved that there's a lot of pace in the W14, and yet again, this seems to be the number one issue with which Mercedes has been battling for two consecutive seasons: inconsistencies. Even before the race started, Wolff had his own doubts about a potential Hamilton win and said that while the pole position is definitely something that lifted the spirits back in Mercedes and showed them that they're on the right track, a race win is pretty much impossible given how fast Verstappen is. When talking about this, the Austrian said, "Clearly we have a package today that was competitive and Lewis just drove an amazing lap and put it on pole. I think that's something we can be really proud of. The biggest weakness we have in the car is not a lack of downforce, it is that the car is unpredictable. The drivers never have the confidence to push it hard in qualifying, and I think the car they had today was something that gave confidence and allowed them to push without thinking that it could step on the entrance or exit of the corner." But when asked about whether or not Hamilton has what it takes to replicate the success of the W14's qualifying form over the remainder of the calendar, the Austrian kept the skepticism present as he said, "I think this needs better understanding. We have been able to pull out a great performance today with one car, and maybe the second car would have been there, who knows. But you don't praise the day before the evening, and I think we need to consolidate that, and that's the tricky bit. It's not good when your team boss doesn't believe that the car is capable of replicating the same success over the course of a couple of races. But be that as it may, Hamilton's fears have turned into reality. The W14 is yet another unpredictable car, mostly because the team didn't listen to him when they should have. All of a sudden, we have a car that looks like Red Bull on the outside, but performs way worse than it during the race. I know what you're going to say. Norris had a 33-second deficit to Verstappen in Hungary, so who are we to judge, right? But Hamilton's loss of 3 positions in Turn 1 was followed by Piastri's 10-second advantage over him, and he was angry on the radio, asking where these McLarens were picking up the pace. To that question, the answer from his racing engineer, the main straight and turns 11 and 12. So with this in mind, what can be changed at Mercedes in the near future to make sure that Hamilton drives a car that suits his preferences? One thing that the 7-time world champion would be desperate for his team to vote for is the copying of Red Bull's mechanisms. This is something that McLaren has done in such a great way, but the reality is that a blunt copy won't work as well as we think because every team has gone in a separate direction of developing their car. So Mercedes would have to find their own iteration of Red Bull's philosophy, similar to how McLaren did in the previous couple of months. But nonetheless, this is something that we're most likely not going to witness in the remainder of the season because of the fact that Wolff wants to start working on the 2024 version of the car, while Hamilton is pretty much against this, but we'll get to that later in the video. First, let's see what Hamilton had to say when asked about the W14's pace and why the 7-time world champion is very angry at his team for not listening to him when they're missing out on such potential. When talking about this matter, Hamilton didn't hold back words as he went on to elaborate. We generally have a bigger wing than some of the others, like the Red Bulls for example, but they seem to have more downforce from their floor. I've just got to keep telling the guys we need to go in that direction. I would like to see that either with this year's car or next year. We're a long way away from beating the Red Bull in a race, and obviously now we're behind the McLarens. We've just got to keep pushing. This is something that has the potential to shift the narrative in Mercedes, because not that long ago, Hamilton admitted that he hasn't been in the best form for quite some time, more precisely the last 2 seasons. When you're driving an underperforming car and you're used to always being on the front of the grid, situations like this can occur more frequently than not, and after his emotional pole position in Hungary and the roller coaster of a race, Hamilton said that there's much more performance in him that he's not able to show out there due to the car he's driving. Obviously, we've seen Russell drive a great recovery race, finishing 7th and being promoted to 6th after Leclerc's penalty after starting all the way back in P18. But even so, finishing 18th in a qualifying session in which you took the pole position last year is not something you could be proud of. Nonetheless, the desperation in Hamilton's statement is visible, and he's definitely not the happiest F1 driver right now, considering that he's forced to drive a car that is so unpredictable in between sessions that you have no idea what to expect from it session after session. When talking about this, Hamilton went on to elaborate, "I haven't been at my best for over a year. I felt like qualifying was getting me back in the game, and we may have been able to finish 3rd with a better start. Max just got a better start than me, and I got a bit of wheel spin and was a bit compromised after that. We were just too slow in the first 2 stints. The balance was not good and the car was just slow. It's just the reality. We're not fast enough. I was told the strategy this morning that I would be 5 or 6 tenths slower than the Red Bull, so the fight was not with Max, and I was hoping that we could fight the McLarens." What seems to be a very huge risk for Mercedes is the fact that their customer companies are getting more and more performance with every passing weekend. And unlike Aston Martin, which has been quite fluctuating in the past couple of races, McLaren is now the 2nd fastest team in 2 consecutive events and has been faster than Mercedes in Austria. Therefore, the lead of Mercedes is not something that you can take for granted, and they are currently having quite a battle on their hands. Keep the momentum as the 2nd fastest team and not lose it to the emerging force of McLaren. But for this to be done, Mercedes needs to go the way that Hamilton wants them to, continue the development of the 2023 car instead of focusing on 2024. According to the 7-time world champion, it's still way too early to opt out of this season and start developing the car for the upcoming campaign, mostly because the car they'll have in this season will serve as a foundation for the 2024 Challenger. So if Mercedes is not able to find what's wrong with the car by the end of the season, then rest assured there's going to be some very awkward talks in the garage, and now we're ensured that this is one of the main reasons as to why Hamilton is delaying the contract talks for as long as he can in his own favour. Do you think that Hamilton's statements are legitimate, or do you think this is just a sour expression after not being able to compete for wins for so long? Let us know in the comments below.